everyone, and welcome to All Things Watched. In this video, we are going to talk about episode 1 of one of my, if not my, favorite all-time TV series called Lost. And back in the day, back in 2004, this was the series to watch, and this was back when television was really good, before there was any agendas or craziness, and back when, prime time was like, these series had like over 20 episodes and all that kind of stuff. And so I figured, why not go back and review the entire series of Lost? And we have a couple really big series that we're going to start reviewing very soon, so I'm really excited about that, going back in time and really just talking about some of these awesome TV series that not a whole lot of people really talk about much these days. So let's try to bring back the fandom for some of these great series. And so if you're interested in actually watching this series with me, you can do so over on the Patreon account if you want. But if not, that's no big deal either. It's okay. You can just support here for free on the channel if you choose so. And if not, that's okay as well. Still, thank you for listening if you're watching and all that kind of stuff. And so the first episode of Lost was simply titled Pilot Part 1 because the pilot in this series actually was broken up into 2 episodes. In fact, there's a lot of pilots and even a lot of finales that were actually broken up into 2 parts with this series. And so we're just going to go right ahead and jump in. And so this episode opens with this character, and it starts with him opening his eye. In fact, in a lot of these episodes, they start by zooming in on someone opening their eye. And we might not know right now at this very second, but you will learn that this character's name is Jack. And Jack, of course, is one of the main characters of Lost, and he is basically one of those characters that will be in pretty well the entire show, because, like I said, a lot of the story will be told from his perspective and whatnot. And so that's how the story opens. It opens with Jack, and he is opening his eyes, and you can see here that he is surrounded by these bamboos, and he ends up hearing something in the woods, or in the environment surrounding him. And when he looks over, it ends up being a golden lab, or a golden retriever, which ends up coming over and basically licks his face and then runs away again. And so when this happens, Jack now is able to gain his composure and basically comes to, and he's able to stand up, and you can tell that he's very disoriented, and he has been through something very traumatic, and you can tell he's even a little bit weak, maybe even a little bit dizzy. He ends up having to lean against this bamboo, so to speak, but he hears a lot of screaming and a lot of commotion off in the near distance, so he starts to run towards it. And once he starts running, he ends up coming out on this absolutely beautiful beach. And as far as I know, this whole series, was actually filmed down in Hawaii, so that would explain why it's so beautiful. Hawaii is a very beautiful state. I think they even filmed in certain locations that were still, with some of the same locations as Jurassic Park as well, I think. At least there's a couple of shots, I believe, in other episodes where you see the big canyon where the T-Rex is running after the characters from Jurassic Park. But either way, you can see here how beautiful the landscape is and how bright and vibrant the whole show is. Really the whole setting of this island. But anyways, he ends up making his way to the beach, and he goes around the corner, and this is where he ends up learning and realizing, I guess, that they have just went through a plane crash. And as you can see, the turbine on the plane is still spinning. You can see people are sort of walking almost zombie-like. They are very disoriented, confused. There's a lot of screaming. There's a lot of chaos, and Jack ends up coming out, and they have a really cool transitioning, almost panning type shot as he's walking along the beach. We get to see the type of environment and the type of situation that they're in. You can see how chaotic it is and how much of the plane was actually destroyed. And I really liked how they how they shot that whole sequence with him sort of going around the beach, walking along the beach, and that whole sequence was done really well. and the special effects. And as you can see, how good the quality was. Remember, this season came out in 2004, I believe, is when season one came out. And you also have to understand that back in these days, they did not rely so heavy on CGI and special effects. So a lot of this stuff was actually practical and really shot on location. And oftentimes I can remember reading the behind the scenes. Well, actually, I own this whole series on Blu-ray, and I have the special editions, and really they really go into a lot of detail about like the weather, how difficult sometimes it was to shoot in this sort of tropical weather, and how quick a storm can come and then go away. And it's just, you can tell everything about this series in every single episode. There's a lot of detail put into how it was shot and how it looks, and just they really do a great job at capitalizing the beauty of Hawaii and utilizing the environment in such a strong, effective way. And so, as Jack continues up the beach, you can see that there's people pinned down, and like we said, injured, screaming. There's a lot of chaos, and so Jack ends up Jack and a group of other people ends up helping. They all help one another, and they end up saving this one guy here who's very close to this turbine. Like we said, it's still spinning, and so they basically get him up. And and we also learn in this episode that Jack is a doctor, and so he's sort of really stepping up, almost like the leader of the group right from the very first episode, which we'll learn as the series goes on. He does sort of become like that lead to some degree. There'll be a few, I guess you could say, leader roles, a few characters that sort of have those leader characteristics. But for now, you can tell that Jack right now is stepping up, but mainly because he's the medic, he's the doctor, and he just wants to make sure that everybody is okay. Then we get this really cool scene here, where we have a character looking at another character being sucked into the turbine. Like I said, it's still very dangerous, still very chaotic. The turbines are still spinning from the plane, and he gets sucked in, which ends up causing a massive explosion. Which I don't think anyone really dies in this explosion, other than the person who actually got sucked into the turbine. But as you can see, there's just huge explosions. Everything is blowing up all around. But once again, you can tell how real it looks. I have a feeling that this, maybe not necessarily the explosion, but the fire itself, I think, was very real. Like I said, back in these days, there's a lot more practical effects. That's why these series look so good and they look like they're so well shot, is because there's not a whole lot of CGI. And so that ends up happening. Everything ends up blowing up, and it's just complete utter chaos. And everybody is really just trying to, I think, sort of snap back into reality. I'm sure some people are going through like PTSD, just from all the chaos and all the trauma. I'm sure it's really hard for people to, really keep a level head. So Jack, after the ordeal of the explosion, Jack ends up continuing on, and he starts searching through a bunch of the luggage and just a bunch of the surrounding, everything really, luggage and plane parts, and he sometimes searches bodies and stuff, because he's really just looking for medicines or food or anything really that can really help him. But I think at this period in time specifically, he's looking for something to potentially heal himself, because he himself has endured a really bad injury, which you learn later on. When he takes his shirt off, you can see how bad he is cut, and he definitely needs stitches. But unfortunately, the place that he has cut is in an area which is very difficult for him to actually reach, and so he ends up having to seek help, and he gets that from another character named Kate, and Kate ends up basically stumbling upon him. Her name is Kate Austin, and she stumbles upon Jack, and he basically asks her, hey, do you have any experience with sewing? And he says literally sewing anything, sewing clothes or curtains or anything like that. And I'm pretty sure she tells him that she had some experience at like sewing like curtains or something like that. And he's like, okay, that's good enough. I think he's really just making sure that she knows how to use a needle, and more so knows how to tie the knots to make sure that if she's going to seal it, she'll actually seal it. And so, she basically ends up helping him. And he also uses little bottles of alcohol that were on the plane, I believe, to actually sterilize the cut. And so I really liked how they utilized that part as well. They didn't just, sort of glance over that. They did think about that in the writing, which I was able to really appreciate. They really thought about, the idea of them being here in this potentially unsanitary, unclean environment, and so they actually use the bottles of liquor and sterilize it, and so she ends up sewing him back together. And so then we're introduced to this character, who is a character that eventually really grows on you. At first you don't really know who he is or what he is, but at this point in time in the series, once you see him in the first couple of episodes, you do learn that he is kind of the realistic character, in the sense of, he sees the situation that they're really in, and so he sort of capitalizes on that the best way that he can. He realizes that they are stranded and that there may not be any help, and so he sort of, comes to terms with that very quickly, and so his name is Sawyer, or at least that's what they call him. That's more of like a nickname, but they call him Sawyer. I think it's revealed later on in the series what his real name is, but I won't say it right now for this far, just in case you're watching it along with me, or you're watching it for the first time. I don't want to spoil the whole series just by talking about these episodes, but he is a really cool character, and he sort of plays almost like this kind of a bad guy. You get almost like, not so much a gangster vibe, but I would say more of like a, he kind of puts me in mind of more of like a Cowboys and Indians type character. He would probably be a cowboy, so to speak. And so, but as you can see here, he's smoking cigarettes, which also says something about his personality as well. He's obviously addicted to cigarettes, so that might be something that could potentially become a problem for them later on in the future. If they're stranded on this island, they that he's addicted to cigarettes. It's not like he has an unlimited amount, so that could become a problem later on, or it might not. But either way, it just sort of shows that he is sort of this rebel kind of gangster type character, who maybe don't quite follow along with the rules, at least not all the time. And in this situation, he's sort of making up his own rules because the rules sort of no longer apply, so to speak, in the generic sense, I mean. And so he ends up getting up and walking. They show him walking away towards sort of like the sunset. And so I only took this screenshot just for the sake of showing the beauty once again of how beautiful Hawaii is, and just how nice the setting is. Like I said, I love shows back in these days, back in the 2000s, and even before then, because like I said, a lot of it was actually shot on location. It was all practical effects, and it was absolutely beautiful. Even if you weren't a huge fan of the story of Lost, you can't deny that it looked absolutely beautiful. Every scene, every shot, and every episode always has sort of these moments where they do a great job at showing the environment and whatnot. And so, as you can, another important detail about this shot as well is that you can see that different people now are sort of, they're sort of sticking with the people that they know, and they're lighting these fires, and so they have fire now. So I guess now the most important thing will be food and water, even though they're probably not thinking about that at this point right now. You can see that the groups are huddling together. They're sticking with people that they know, friends, family, and they do have these little fires now set up on the beach, which could also be used as signal fires. They're probably hoping that somebody that flies by would see it, a helicopter or a plane or something. It's a great idea to have a fire lit all the time, just for the sake of trying to get rescue. So then we get introduced to a few more characters now. This character, of course, is one of my favorite characters of the series, or at least she will become one of your favorite characters as it goes on, and her name is Claire. And at the time when she lands here on the island, she is actually pregnant, and she ends up growing a really cool relationship with another character as well, which we'll talk about later on. But right here, right now in particular, this is just her, and as you can see, she's really far into her pregnancy, so that also can, you can sort of see that sort of becoming a problem in the future as well. But like I said, she is definitely one of my favorites of the whole series once you start to actually watch it all. Then we're introduced to this really cool character, and this character's name is Hurley, and he's basically the heart of the show. This is someone that you're really going to fall in love with as the series goes on. He's kind of like the big teddy bear, the kind of guy that you always just want to hug, and I don't know, he's just, there's something really innocent about him, and he's very honest, and he's just a really lovable character. And he has a really cool story arc as well by the time you get to the very end of the series, and where his character ends up at the end of it, it's not disappointing. I really loved his story, and I really loved where his story ended, and I thought that his ending was very, very appropriate. And so we just get a whole montage, really a whole beret of different characters, and we really get to see, a whole bunch of different personalities. We see all these different people who are, for the most part, strangers, but now they have to come together and try and survive this ordeal. So then it goes back to Jack and Kate, and of course she now has them all stitched up, and you can already sort of tell already, even in this episode, that there's potentially a little bit of, maybe a little bit of something there, maybe a little bit of romance that could maybe potentially spark in the future. They do have this sort of little puppy dog love, so to speak, in their eyes, but it's still nothing too serious. This is only a pilot. Really, most of this episode and episode 2 really mainly focuses on the crash itself, but still worth noting that you can tell that there is something between them here. They do have that sort of little twinkle in their eye. And so then we come to a scene here at night, and this was a really cool scene because it really shows. It shows, once again, it shows the groups, it shows the situation that they're in. Everybody's huddled, with the people that they know, and they're all sort of sticking to their own bonfires. But also, I thought it was also really just a really nice shot in general of the night sky. You can see the stars and everything in the background, and it's really, really nice. And so it cuts to these characters, and so these two characters are, I believe these were known as Boone, and I can't remember her name is Boone. Boone is the guy, and then this, I believe we end up learning, is actually his stepsister, I believe it is. Yeah, it's Boone and Shannon. Yes, that's who it is. Boone and Shannon, and they are, well, eventually you learn, I believe, that they're actually stepsisters, so I don't think they're actual, true blood siblings, but I think they're more like stepsisters or something like that, and whatnot. But either way, you can tell, so you can see them two sticking together. Them two have a really cool story arc as well, especially Shannon. I really like Shannon's story and where her story goes, and Boone is a really likable character as well, and where they are right now compared to where they will end up in the future. It was really fun seeing their story and their characters being developed as well. And that's one thing that I have to give, I have to give credit to with Lost. They always do a phenomenal job with their characters. In fact, this is actually why this was one of my favorite shows, is because I don't really know any show that utilizes their characters as well as what Lost did. And every character, even the secondary or tertiary characters, they all just have such great story arcs that it's hard not to like any of them really. So it's just really cool. And, even these two characters, I won't go as far as saying that they're main characters, but they're more like co-main characters. They still play a really big role, just not as big as say what Jack and them will end up playing. Then they cut to this scene where you have Michael and his father, Walt, or no, sorry, Michael is the father, and then his son Walt, sorry, and as you can see, they are here. Now you will see that in this episode there is a little tiny bit of, there's something going on between them. There is like a little bit of distance. I guess you could say there's a bit of distance between them. They're not as close as what you would suspect for that sort of father and son relationship, but you do feel like Michael does absolutely love Walt. It's not like he doesn't care for him or doesn't love him, but you sort of get the vibe more so that maybe he wasn't quite there for him the whole time and whatnot. But either way, their story arcs are really interesting as well. Both Michael and Walt's story arc is really cool. Then we're introduced to these two characters, which will also become, at least for me, two of my favorite characters, and they are known as Jin and Sun. And even when you learn their backstory about where they come from, they have huge character developments, especially Jin specifically, because right now when you meet Jin and Sun, at least here in season 1, especially in these early episodes, you really see Jin is really holding on to that sort of old school like Japanese culture. Actually they're Korean, I believe, actually this Korean culture where they are sort of they're like he's very old fashioned, so to speak. The woman doesn't really have a whole lot of rights. He doesn't want Sun to be going around say in like a bikini or anything like that. Like he wants her very well dressed and very well kept. And so he's sort of a very aggressive, almost a dominant force in that relationship. But so it's really fun to see their story go, because he really opens up once he learns and sort of interacts with other characters and whatnot, and Sun sort of steps up on her own while they're on the island, and she sort of steps up and really, becomes her own character. She gets a lot of independence, and that's one thing that this story does really well as well, is because it's not only are these characters lost on an island, but they're also sort of lost inside, like emotionally, even where they are in their lives. They're lost, in a metaphorical sense too, and also a physical sense. So something else that was very creative with this series, I thought, was that. And so I absolutely love these two characters as well, especially as the story goes on. So in the meantime, during the night, we end up hearing this really strange thing going through the wilderness, going through the woods, and it literally moves a bunch of trees, and you can tell that whatever it is, it's really, really big, and definitely potentially a threat for these survivors. Could it be a dinosaur or something? I mean, very unlikely, but you don't know, because this island is very strange, and in fact it causes so much chaos that all the characters actually get up and sort of huddle together, because they are very, very nervous, and they are very, they really don't know what's happening or what's going on here. And as you can see, we have Saeed, Claire, Charlie, and all these really just awesome Claire, Michael, Charlie, Boone, Saeed. You can see all these characters, and they're all huddling together. So then we start to get a flashback here, and as you can see, this is Jack, and he's sort of standing up here at his seat, and we basically end up seeing everything that happens from Jack's perspective during the plane crash. And so as he's getting up, as you can see, Charlie actually ends up walking in front of him, and we end up having him, and he's sitting next to Rose. So Rose is right across from him, and so they were sort of interacting on the plane and whatnot, just because they were simply sitting next to each other. But once Charlie ends up walking by, then you can hear on the intercom, over the intercom, that the pilot basically tells them all to sit back down in their seats because of the turbulence that's coming and whatnot. And so they do. They end up sitting down, and of course the turbulence ends up getting worse and worse and worse, to the point then where the masks ends up dropping off, and we end up getting this absolutely brutal sequence here, where we actually get to see the plane crash, and it's really vibrant. But once again, it looks really cool and whatnot. But still, they do a really good job at shooting this scene, and it's absolutely terrifying, and it's just a really cool sequence to watch. And so in the meantime, back here on the island, after we get that flashback sequence, Jack decides that maybe they should actually go in search of the cockpit, so to speak, maybe to see if there's a radio intact, or maybe see if they can, get a message out, or maybe send out like an SOS. And so, of course, as soon as Jack says that he wants to do this, Kate don't be long following behind, and she jumps right on board, and she's like, yep, I'm going to. And so she ends up tagging along, and Jack ends up telling her that she's going to need better footwear. And then we get this really devastating scene here, where it shows her actually taking footwear off of a dead body, and that was just a really devastating scene, because of the fact that how many dead bodies are around, and what this group of people just went through. So it is kind of hard to watch, and it is really hard to see them having to do this type of stuff. And I don't know, it just, when I seen this, I don't know, I just found it kind of really sad, because it really forces the characters, to realize the situation that they're in, and that situation really sinks in when it gets to the point where here you are taking shoes off of a dead body. So, you really get that stranded sort of feeling. She can't just go to the store and buy a new set of shoes. She has to sort of make do with what they have available right here during this time. And so she puts on the shoes, and so Jack, Kate, and Charlie ends up venturing out to see what they can find, and to see if they can find the cockpit. And so we end up getting this really cool scene here, where all the rain falls down, and everybody sort of takes cover, except for this one character, who we'll learn eventually. His name is John Locke, and he has a really cool story as well. And his character is a very compelling character as well, and especially with where his story goes. He has a really crazy story once you see the series as a whole. But like I said, it's really cool to watch him and his performance as well. And actually, the guy who plays him is actually going to be in the upcoming The Walking Dead: The Ones Who Live series. I think he's supposed to be the villain in the new Walking Dead series. His name is Terry O'Quinn. Really good actor, and he does an absolutely perfect job here with his role here as well as John Locke. So I just wanted to point that out, that he's sort of like you can almost say like he's the spiritual side of the show. He sort of believes that, in the destiny, and they're here for a reason, and the island is sort of trying to, he looks at it as a very from a very spiritual perspective. And so, in the meantime, Kate, and Charlie end up finding the cockpit. And once they actually go in there, they end up discovering that the pilot is actually still alive. And the guy who plays the pilot is actually the same guy who ended up playing Matt. I believe it was Matt on what was that called, on Heroes, I believe it is. But I'm trying to see if I can find his name here. I can't find his name here off the top of my head, but either way, he's a really big actor, and he's a great actor as well. So he ends up giving them a radio and whatnot. And while he's giving them the radio, Charlie seems to have disappeared. Nobody really knows where Charlie is, but then he ends up coming out of the bathroom, and they do explain this, I think, a little bit more in the second episode, I believe it is, in part 2 of the pilot. And so, it is kind of strange that he ends up going into the washroom, but like I said, they will explain that later on, but I won't say why here, just for the sake of not spoiling it for you. But anyways, while they're in here, something really crazy ends up happening. It's almost like that giant monster that they seen the night before ends up coming back, and it actually rips the pilot up out of the cockpit. And and once it rips him up, then there's nothing but blood ends up squirting down. And so that a lot of bad stuff, whatever happened to this pilot, is not good. He may have actually been ripped in half. And of course, this freaks out Kate, Charlie, and Jack, and so they all end up taking off. And at first they end up getting separated, and they end up taking for it, and it's raining, and they end up getting separated, but they all end up reuniting again by the end of the episode. And we end up seeing the pilot, and the pilot is up in the trees, and he is completely beaten and battered, and he is officially dead. And of course, as you can see, the rain has stopped, and Jack, Kate, and Charlie are now reunited, and that is basically where part 1 of the pilot ends. So in terms of an opening pilot, they do a really good job at sort of keeping you interested here. The whole idea of the plane crash, but then also a lot of the peculiarities with the island itself. There's a lot of stuff going on here that we just simply don't know about yet. What is this giant monster that has not only the ability to kill people, but even have the ability to rip them up out of the trees, or rip them up, literally pick them up and then end up throwing them up in a tree just like it's nothing. So that's one really big sort of question going on with the island right now. What is this thing that's on the island? So we don't really know that yet. And it's also going to be very interesting to try to find out, a little bit about the characters themselves. Why was Charlie in the bathroom of the cockpit? It almost seems like maybe he's looking for something or trying to do something. It's going to be very interesting to see, Claire, how is she going to get on, given the fact that she's pregnant. And so this first episode, the first half of the pilot, does a really good job at setting up the environment, setting up the locale, and basically the tragedy and the ordeal that they're all facing, and whatnot. And as the series continues, they will continue to do a great job with all that. And honestly, I thought that this was a really strong pilot. And literally right from this first episode, I was hooked right from day one, and I can't wait to continue to talk about the rest of the series with you folks. And I absolutely love this season. I could not wait to see, like I said, how are they going to get off the island? Are they going to be able to use this radio? And also to figure out, if they are able to communicate with someone, how long would it take for people to come? Will people eventually, see the smoke signals from the fire? Is there anybody else on the island? And once again, what is this giant monster or animal or whatever it is that has the ability to do this to people? So many questions, but ultimately, great pilot. It really keeps you interested, forcing you to want to come back to see the answers to a lot of these questions. And honestly, where are they? Where did they land? Now, I know obviously this is being shot in Hawaii, but obviously in the show, they didn't just land in Hawaii. But we do know that it seems to be warm and tropical. There seems to be a fair amount of rain, which means they should be able to collect water. So I guess the biggest thing now is food. So with that being said, folks, that's my review of episode 1 of part 1 of the pilot of Last. Let me know in the comment section below if you liked this episode. Just in case there is someone who's watching through this for the very first time who hasn't seen it, try to keep the comments spoiler free so we don't ruin it for other people. And I'm going to try to remember that with these reviews as well. And let me know what your thoughts were the very first time you've seen this pilot, and how excited were you to see the next episode. So with that being said, folks, that's all I got for you. If you like this video, click that subscribe button, and until the next one, take care.